box office top 10 for 1992 in America. Batman Returns made a sequel of that. That was at top. Lethal Weapon 3, they made a sequel to that, was in second. Sister Act, they made a sequel to that, is in third. Home Alone 2, they made a sequel to that, is in fourth. Wayne's World, they made a sequel to that, is in fifth. Basic Instinct, they made a sequel to that, is in sixth. A League of Their Own, they made 2 spin-off TV series of that, is in seventh. Aladdin, Disney's made loads of stuff out of that, is in eighth. 10th, Under Siege, they made a sequel of that. Ninth, The Hand That Rocks the Cradle. They've only gone and finally done a remake of it. The new The Hand That Rocks the Cradle lands on Disney's Hulu service the week this is being recorded. You've probably not seen huge premiere pictures or anything like that. It is one of those cases of a bit of name recognition gets you a remake, basically. Disney is mining its back catalogue to try and find stuff. And there's something of, on reflection, the old Roger Corman score of doing things here. So if you're an up-and-coming filmmaker, I mean, in days of old, Roger Corman would give you $1 million, creative freedom, go and do what you want, just deliver me a good film. I mean, that's putting it like in a fairly two-dimensional way, but that was roughly kind of what the gig is. Now, if you're an up-and-coming director, it's and I'm kind of thinking of, you look at Patricia Riggin earlier this year, and she made the G20 film, and she told me in an interview, it's just like Spielberg and Nolan are getting those scripts. I sort of make do with the scripts that I get. So Michelle Garza Cervera, I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly, is a director who's done a bunch of films I've not seen: Isosceles, La Rabla de Clara, Abysmal, the original, and Falacoman, and she lands the gig of directing a new take on The Hand That Rocks the Cradle. Now, for Disney, this is, let's call it what it is. It is a corporate product. There is name recognition. If you can make something decent out of it, all power to you. But the bottom line is, we need material to go on Disney Plus, ideally this coming Friday. Thus, let's go through the archives, what we own, what can we remake that we could, isn't going to cost us an awful lot of money. And it lands on The Hand That Rocks the Cradle. The films that I just mentioned from Severo are her short films. She's done, this is her her second feature. So she made a directorial debut with Husera the Bone Woman in 2022, which she also wrote. I confess I've not seen her work before. Here she's working from a screenplay by Mika Bloomberg that's based on the original The Hand That Rocks the Cradle that was penned by Amanda Silver. And this time, I mean, if you remember the original The Hand That Rocks the Cradle, it was a huge hit, and it was basically billed as the Psycho Nanny from Hell film. Really straightforward horror convention. There you are in your domestic bliss environment. You hire this nanny. The nanny puts your child under threat, puts you under threat. But are you going mad? Is it just you that thinks that? Because no one else seems to believe you and everything else, blah, blah. I mean, you sort of get the gig. The setup this time, you get Mary Elizabeth Winstead as Caitlin. Now, she is the parent of 2 young daughters. She's married to Raul Castillo, who's playing Miguel Morales. And then it's quite a thin cast, really. There's not an awful lot of people in there. And then let's just call it the Rebecca De Mornay role from the original, the famed Rebecca De Mornay role from the original, is now played by the brilliant Michael Monroe. So that's a fairly decent cast. You also get Martin Starr, he of Freaks and Geeks, Adventureland, in the mix. But Mary Elizabeth Winstead, really good at genre stuff. Michael Monroe, I mean, I love It Follows. 2 really good performers to headline this. And so you kind of got the guts for something, or the guts of something that could be kind of fashioned into something relatively interesting. The setup this time is, I mean, it's roughly the same. We start off with, I always try and go spoiler light. I did reflect, actually, if this was like one of Disney's successes of the 1992, if it had been an animated film, it would have banged out 5 sequels by now. But instead, you sort of get a kind of weird subversion of Steve Martin and Mick Jackson's LA Story. Only Micah Monroe is basically the character Polly with let's just say, a background. Caitlin also has a background, not going into that. And Micah Monroe, in this case, struggling to make ends meet. She is not living the LA story of Steve Martin's film. She is living the LA story where there are bastard landlords who put the rent up, where there are lawyers involved, where you're in the middle of a big city that you can't afford to live in. It's one of the ways that the film tries to go quite relatable. I mean, there are a couple of others that it throws in. I'll come to fairly shortly. But bottom line is, she in the end needs a job. Mary Elizabeth Winstead's Caitlin needs a nanny. Then the nanny ends up living in the house, and then kind of stuff happens. It is not, to its credit, a photocopy of the original film. They could have got away with that. In fact, they kind of bring in a teeny soupçon of single white female, I think, into it. But it's not a straight retread. And instead, I mean, and also, you look at the 1990s one this time, and I believe the phrase is it's of its age. Certainly the Ernie Hudson character in there makes no reappearance here. One of a bunch of roles that Ernie Hudson took where he didn't even make the poster. That's a whole story for another time. Here, a little bit more concentrated, slightly smaller cast, and the focus now is very much on a kind of who's telling the truth between Caitlin and Polly, which Winstead and Micah Monroe have a reasonable amount of fun with. In terms of relatable moments, you get Mary Elizabeth Winstead's character has a car glove compartment that she stashes loads of sweets in. I definitely don't do that if you're thinking of nicking my car or anything like that. There's a bit where a little kid just screams, "I need space," and there's loads of like little 2020s touches that are bound to annoy people who get annoyed in the comments on Facebook. So all power to that. The family unit is described, it's a slightly a modern family unit, I guess, in terms of the stuff that's talked about at the dinner table. I don't want to talk about, I don't want to talk about it because I just don't want to give it away. I just see what kind of, I see what the film is doing. I see who the film is annoying, and I sort of like, I like that, really. The problem is, I mean, first of all, I was struck relatively early on that Michelle Garza-Severa is making a real effort just to try. Joe Williams is her cinematographer. They're making a real effort to shoot this properly. I don't think they've had an awful lot of resources to make this. I think it was a case of, here is a film, here is a deadline. It strikes me very much like that. But Severa's schooled in her thrillers. She'll shoot through mirrors. She makes the most of little bits of glass. She's looking for reflection. She's looking for odd angles. I really appreciated all of that. And she's trying basically to mine what she can out of a house that screams movie set house. I mean, pretty much as soon as you see it. So, I mean, parents out there, it's the movie idyll, I think, that you have a mother and father of two young kids, and your house is spotless. There's no ketchup on the sofa that's been spilt there. The kids haven't strewn their clothes everywhere. There aren't toys everywhere. If you hadn't seen that there were two kids living in the house, you would never believe there were two kids living in the house. I wouldn't even believe there's a gerbil living in the house. It's that spotless. And straight away, I'm just like, nah, I'm not buying that. And it's sort of, it keeps getting constrained by that it's very, very obvious that it sounds like a really daft thing to say, but it's very, very obvious you're watching a film. And I think, Disney knows what it's getting here. It knows at heart it's got a little bit of second screen film about the commission, I'd imagine. As much as the filmmakers have pushed against that and tried to do something with it, it's almost the Blumhouse formula. You contain yourself to one or two, the early Blumhouse formula, you contain yourself to one or two locations. But in this case, even though I think they shot it in location in Los Angeles, they look like movie houses. They don't look like houses human beings live in. They go to the kitchen at one point, and there's this pristine, beautifully unused coffee machine in the corner. I looked at that. I'd have used the shit out of that. There's no way that sits there and just looks like it may as well have the cellophane on it. Didn't buy it. There are bits and bobs. I mean, there's a lecture on baby food and the perils of baby food, whether it's right, whether it's natural. And so that comes in, and I sat there thinking, well, it never did RoboCop any harm, did it? In terms of relatability and trying to get across poverty, really. And there is an undercurrent of that the film never really explores. I understand why. But when it goes about as far as Michael Monroe complaining there's no mayo on her tuna because she couldn't afford the mayo and then had to eat the tuna out the can, it sort of gets it across. But, all right, you could have probably sent me a text on that. So the film trundles along, and gradually the screws are turned a little bit as uncertainty over whether this nanny is on the level or not come in, and they throw in a bit of kinky shit as well and just try and spice it up a little bit. I mean, they know what they're doing here. They know what beats they're trying to hit. And I was left with this idea, really, that for the most part, a bunch of interesting people have come together here to try and get something out of this corporate mandated product. I respected the fact that it's shorter than the original. Do you ever remember Meet Joe Black, which was the Brad Pitt, Anthony Hopkins film, a remake of the film Death Takes a Holiday? And the remake was twice the length. It was nearly 3 hours long. This is a slimmer film, The Hand That Rocks the Cradle. I would suggest it's got slightly less I'd suggest it's got comfortably less interesting ingredients, really. I never really got the spark of tension. And I don't know whether it's because I come to this knowing the first film from Winstead and Monroe. I don't think they put in bad performances here, but I didn't really get the tete-a-tete. I didn't really get much in the way of uncertainty, really, from where their characters were, where they were going. I don't think there was much doubt to it. I think there are a couple of ingredients the film tries to put in just to try and give it slightly more identity. Some of it works, most of it doesn't. But then you get moments which I really respected, where it leans out of the blue heavily into genre, really. That let's just say a fair amount of horror-y, smashy stuff suddenly comes in. Then you get out the blue. I mean, Ariel Marx's score suddenly goes nuts. And I'm just like, oh, all right, this is threatening to become a little bit unhinged. It's threatening to break out of the cage, which it's very comfortably been existing with in to that point. But the truth is, in the end, it doesn't. And I think, I mean, there's a bit where a DNA test takes place, and the results are given through basically bullet point plot exposition, really. And you find, I mean, in the end, it's hinging on things like, oh, there's a computer printout and stuff like that. And you're just like, oh, and it occasionally threatens to be this good genre film. And instead, what you've got is, I would suggest, a competently made, and I'll come back to Michelle Garza-Severa in a minute, a competently made second screen remake of a good, decent thriller without something like Rebecca De Mornay's breakout role in it. Rebecca De Mornay, at the point she took on the role, the original film, playing completely against her screen perception, and had a ball with it. And I don't think the casting is quite that savvy here. For Michelle Garza-Severa, this is a foothold into Hollywood filmmaking. And I'm conscious that most of us who filed out of watching The Hand That Rocks the Cradle in 92 in the cinema and saw the words directed by Curtis Hanson would have no idea where Curtis Hanson would go from that point. Again, and I look at like the parallels here. Both are perfectly decently to well-directed films. Perfectly happy with that. And they both work with the ingredients that they've got. I think Hanson had a better screenplay, really, to work with. But also, a bunch of stuff, really. In the case here, if you look that Hanson followed The Hand That Rocks the Cradle up with The River Wild, and then made one of the best films of the 1990s, LA Confidential, then followed that up with Wonder Boys. There's stuff here that Severa puts into the film that tells me she's no hack. This may have been the job to get her into Hollywood, but I kind of approached this as she's kind of got a far more. It's like she's got the Roger Corman gig with slightly more money, but without the creative control. I'm going to keep an eye on her. Because I'm intrigued to see how she follows that up when she gets a little bit more freedom, a chance to have a little bit more fun, because there are flashes here that I was just like, yeah, okay. However, the overall is, I go back to, it never really escapes that cage of the corporate mandated remake because we need a bit of product for our streaming service. The original film, I think, is still on Disney Plus. Doesn't all stack up particularly well today, but I'm watching that one more. Well, I'm not in a rush to watch that one again, really. Although I rewatched it fairly recently. I can't imagine I'm going to watch this new one again. It ticks its box. Let's call it that. It ticks its box.